We're going to be talking about the 5 biggest problems with having a baby leopard gecko. The things that you're going to come across and how to fix those little problems. This is Lola. She's the one that's going to be helping us out today. She was named by our amazing Patreon supporters. The link's in the description if you want to check that out. In the comments, let me know the names of all of your baby leopard geckos. So the biggest problem, number 1 on the list of the biggest problems with owning a baby leopard gecko is shedding. Now 9 times out of 10, a baby leopard gecko goes to a home of a new reptile owner. And they don't understand a lot of stuff to do with like ectotherms or shedding or anything like that. Shedding is the biggest. You'll start to see your baby leopard gecko's whole body just go really white, really pale. Then you'll start seeing skin peel off. And you're like, oh my god, my baby leopard gecko's skin's peeling off. Why is that? Well, that's shedding. That's perfectly normal. There are some ways you can help it. There are some problems with shedding. What it is basically leopard gecko and any other reptile, their skin doesn't stretch like ours does. So they have to grow out of their skin. Once they grow out of their skin, they will start licking their nose, rubbing up against some quite rough surfaces within the enclosure. For me, I always like to put a little piece of cork back inside the enclosure just so they can rub up against it that little bit. Once they've got it over their nose, then they can start rubbing up against various different corners and angles and surfaces, rough surfaces. And then once they get it in their mouth, and they can start really turning around just like that and start peeling the skin off their entire body. If the humidity is perfectly fine in the enclosure, if they have a humid spot that they can go to, that will help them through it. I'll go over that in a minute. And they will basically eat their own shed. Their own shed is full of nutrition. It's what they do in the wild. They will eat their own shed. So you won't see a shed lying around. You might see a handprint every now and then. If you do, chances are your humidity or your humid spot, your humid hide, whatever, isn't absolutely perfect and they had a trouble shedding. Some of the problems you find with shedding, you will get, oh, here she goes. You will get the odd time where it'll be on the tip of their toes. You need to get that shed off. If you don't, that skin will contract around that various little area. Oh, here she goes. And it will stop the blood flow to that area, whether it be on the tip of their tail, their toes, their feet, anywhere like that. So you need to make sure every bit of shed is off every single time. The ways you can do that to help that is quite simply a humid hide. That's a little hide that's either full of sphagnum moss or paper towels or anything like that, and they can go inside there and that will get the water between the 2 layers of skin and just help it that little bit extra, just to help it get out of that skin. You can make your own humid hides. Me personally, I have the babies. I breed these babies. That's why I've got one that is so young right now. And I have them in quite a sterile setup because I want them to be fairly perfect. And these are the ones that I made. Got a little hole just there, paper towel, damp. You can see how humid it is inside there. And that is all I do. If you want to learn how to make that or any other little reptile DIY hacks, just click on the video just there. Number 2 on the list of the biggest problems with owning a baby leopard gecko is the feeding. Quite often I see an awful lot of posts on social medias and my comment section down below in my videos. My leopard gecko doesn't want to eat. I've had it a few days now and it just doesn't want to eat. Let me run through all this. Everybody stresses, and you'll find that most of the topics that we're going to talk about today are all down to the human relative of this topic. So you're scared that your leopard gecko isn't eating. It's going to take a few days for your leopard gecko to get used to its new surroundings. It's going to take a few days for it to realise that this new environment is its new home. It's going to take a few days for it to realise where its food is and remember where its food is. Remember where its water is, all that sort of stuff. As regards to what you actually want to feed your leopard gecko, you've got to bear into mind it will take a few days for them to start eating. If they don't eat, there are a few things you can do, which I'll go through in a bit, but what can you actually feed them? They're insectivores. They're a crepuscular species, so they're dawn and dusk most active and through the night, so you're never going to see them feed through the day. Basically, don't chuck your food in like some people say and then leave it 10 minutes and then take it away, because if you do that middle of the day, they're not going to eat. But the food you can feed them, you've got mealworms, you've got dubia roaches, you've got red runner roaches, you've got crickets. There's a whole array of different live foods that you can give them. They're an insectivore species, so they will only eat bugs. So if you're not really good at handling bugs, you might want to learn how to handle the bugs. I mean, me personally, I can just pick them up perfectly fine. If you are a bit nervous, you've got various tongs. You can pick up 50 pairs of these tongs on eBay for like £4. You may have to wait for them to come because they've got to come from coronavirus central, but you get the point, there are ways around it. Appropriate sized bugs. Now this is where I come in really handy with all the live food breeding that I do. Over here, I've got, you can see it, just that tub just there. That's my big dubia roach breeding colony. Over there, I've got my mealworm breeding colony. I've got a cricket breeding colony. I breed all my own live food, and that's because I can get different sizes of live food. Right now, I like to use mealworms today. You want to give a variety of all these bugs to your baby leopard gecko, simply because each individual bug has a different nutritional value. Every single time you feed anything to your baby leopard gecko, you want to make sure you dusted it in the correct calcium and nutritional supplements. So if you don't use a UVB light in your enclosure, then calcium with D3 is what you're going to need. You can also go down the line of Nutribor or any sort of massively enriching mineral boost for your live food. All you've simply got to do is open your little tub, grab your mealworms. This is what I'm using today, mealworms. They had dubia roaches a few days ago. I sprinkle a little bit in, give it a shake about, get it covered, get them covered, nice, dusted nicely, and then I basically just put that inside their feeding dish. Their feeding dish that I use are these little Komodo ones. As you can see, there's a little lip there. They're absolutely fascinating. They're absolutely perfect. They do absolutely amazingly at keeping your mealworms in there. You can just chuck them in. A good top tip for a baby leopard gecko is count how many live food items you're putting in that bowl. The next morning, go back and count how many's left, if there is any left, and then you'll know if he's eating, how much he's eating, all that sort of stuff. You can also check out for stool samples, their poo. Make sure it's perfectly digested as it comes out the other end. If not, you might want to check your humidity, your temperatures, all that sort of stuff. Make sure his favourite hide is over the hot spot so that he can digest his food, because baby leopard geckos need the heat to activate the stomach acids and to help them digest all their food. But for me, breeding the live food really helps get all the different sizes that I need for my entire collection. If you want to learn how to breed live food, I've got loads of videos on dubia roaches, mealworms, crickets, anything basically, superworms as well. I'll leave a card in the top corner of this video just there. Click on that and it will take you straight through to the playlist. You can pick what you want to watch there. Oh my god, my baby leopard gecko screamed at me. It shouted at me. Now I'm scared to touch it. It come running at me with his mouth open going, ah. That's a great one that I always see. And that's our number 3, leopard geckos screaming. Yes, leopard geckos are one of the only reptile lizard species that has a vocal cord. You don't hear it that often. What it is, it could be defense. It could be screaming at you as a defense. Get away from me. I'm a big angry bird. Ah, get away. It's defensive, it's scared, it's stressed. Best thing to do is to get him, put him in his little setup, make sure his setup is perfect way before you actually get your baby leopard gecko, and leave him for a day or two. Let him settle in, then start adding food in there, start doing your handling processes. All you've got to do, the biggest tip for handling, we'll go on to that one a bit later actually. We'll go on to the handling that a little bit later. But they do scream. It can be defensive. If a leopard gecko bites you, because everyone seems to be scared of getting bitten, if you ever get your finger and just run it across a brick wall dead quick, that's exactly what a leopard gecko bite feels like. Not a baby leopard gecko, you can hardly feel that. It's more the shock value that you've actually been bitten that scares people. From an adult, that's what it feels like, just a brick wall. So there really is nothing to worry about. All you really need to do is to jump in, start handling, start caring, start interacting with your baby leopard gecko so that he will eventually learn that you're not a threat, you're his friend, and you want to take care of him and love him the best you possibly can. It takes a long time for that to actually happen. Let's face it, if a giant comes walking up to you, you're going to be scared, you're going to run for the hills. That's exactly what this guy wants to do, but he can't because he's contained in an enclosure. Yes, to wrap that one up, leopard geckos, especially baby leopard geckos, do scream. Occasionally when they're a bit older, you'll hear it every now and then. They're just a bit defensive. You've just caught them off guard, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't happen that often. It can be a bit freaky when you do first hear it, but you kind of get used to it. Even me now, when a baby hatches and I'm getting out the incubator, putting it in, it's running at me going, ah, ah, ah. I'm just like, oh, you're so cute. Come here. I'll grab it and put it in this enclosure. I have to teach it that he is not the boss. I am not scared of him. I am not a threat to him. I want to be his friend. or her friend, because I only incubate for females. Different story altogether. Anyway, leopard geckos do scream. Let's move on to number 4. I think we're on number 4. Social media. Here's one for you. Social media. There are a fair few helpful people out there, but if you jump onto social media and say, I've just noticed this with my leopard gecko, the skin's peeling off. We'll go for shedding. I've just noticed my leopard gecko's skin's peeling off. I'm very worried about it. You're just going to get fired a load of abuse. Granted, and I'll lay this straight out there, the leopard gecko community isn't as aggressive or as bullying as the bearded dragon community, but you're still going to get people come back at you and say, well, you should have done your research beforehand. There are some nice people, there are some nice groups on Facebook to do with leopard geckos, but just take what you hear with a pinch of salt. You're going to get your keyboard warriors sat there going, hey, you're horrible, you're going to kill it, blah, 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 blah. If you have any questions to do with your baby leopard gecko, stick it in the comment section down below. I'm a reliable source. I'm not going to have a go at you for doing the wrong thing or anything. I understand that you don't do the proper research when it comes to owning your first reptile. I didn't do it when I got Diego down there. I know what it's like, and I'm a good, reliable source. So if you have any questions, stick them in the comments down below. But now let's quickly move over to the very last one, number 5, handling. The problem with handling a leopard gecko is you. And that's not me being a bully or anything like that, it's you. You're unconfident, you don't 100% know what you're doing, you've got a very good idea on what to do, but when it comes around to it, you're a bit nervous. That's understandable. I've done a full video on this, to which if you want to watch that video, I'll link it just there for you. But for me, you can either leave your hand in there for a few days and let it come up and sniff you. The way a leopard gecko, most reptiles actually sniff you is using their tongue. If they're coming up to you and going, that's them smelling. They taken all the air scents, the smell, on their tongue into the roof of their mouth. In the roof of their mouth, they've got an organ called the Jacob's organ. That's what processes the smells, and that's basically everything you need to know about that. So he'll come up, he'll start licking your hand, he'll start smelling you, he'll get more used to you not being a threat, which is a great way of starting if you've ever done it before. Me personally, I like to scoop my hand underneath the head and lift, and then they will eventually walk onto your hand, and I can just hold them nicely and gently. I will never grab them. That's a bad thing to do, because well, they're going to be scared of that, aren't they? Quite simply, they're going to be scared of that. You've got a couple of other ways where you can just leave your hand there and just let them walk onto you and then move them around and stuff like that. Now you've got to think, their first time when they're on their hand and you're moving them around, that's a totally new, mind-blowing experience to them. It's like us being on the moon and anti-gravity and all this sort of stuff. So you really have to think it's going to be spooky for them. It's going to be scary for them. Every now and then you might get one that's a bit brass and a bit brave and he's like, yeah, I'm the king. They normally have a little bit of an attitude problem, so you can tame them down as well. There's 1,000,001 different ways to handle your leopard geckos. The best tip I can give you is just be confident. Never do anything, and I stress this, never do anything to ruin a bond between you and that leopard gecko. If you drop him and he falls onto the floor and he hurts himself, that's it. The trust that you built so hard between you and that leopard gecko is gone. You're going to have to start over again. But because he's already lost that bond once, it's going to take even longer and even more effort to build that trust back up again. It can be done. It can be done. Never ever grab the tail. So if he goes to jump off you, never grab the tail, because their defense mechanism in the wild, if they get picked up by a bird, is to quite simply drop that tail off. That's it. It's as simple as that. They'll just drop that tail off. You'll end up with an open wound. I've got some antiseptic stuff here that I can use if that ever does happen. It's never happened to me. However, my male does have a bald tail. What is a bald tail? A regrown tail. So they will regrow the tail, but it will never look the same. It will just look like a daffodil bulb eventually. When it's got a bit of fat in there and stuff like that, it'll just look like a little bulb on the back end of a leopard gecko. And use your common sense. Don't really play around with your leopard gecko while you've got cats running around and stuff like that, because your cats will go for it. If you've got a leopard gecko like I have down in that enclosure just down there, they'll probably go for the cats, to be fair. But that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning into this video. I hope you have learned something. I hope you have understood everything. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the thumbs up button, just because it helps this video out massively. I've just educated you guys for free.